You walked into the room and you already knew, not consciously, below the level of deliberate observation, before the first word was exchanged, before you had any articulable reason for the assessment, but you knew the specific tension between the two people in the corner, the particular quality of the host's smile that said something had happened before you arrived, the slight flatness in your friend's voice that meant they were managing something they had not decided to share. You knew all of this within 30 seconds of entering. And then you spent the next 2 hours managing the knowledge, calibrating your behavior to what you perceived beneath the surface, tracking the shifts in the room's emotional weather with the continuous, automatic, resource-consuming attention of a person who cannot simply be present, because presence, for you, has always involved this level of processing. You were not at the dinner party. You were running an intelligence operation at the dinner party. And here is the thing that nobody who does not live inside this specific experience fully understands. It is not a choice. The perception happens whether or not you want it to. The data arrives whether or not you invited it. The room communicates its emotional undercurrents to your nervous system with the same automatic urgency that other people experience as simple atmospheric noise. You are not observing the world. You are being observed by it, by all of it, simultaneously, continuously, at a resolution that was not calibrated for the simple dinner party, but for something much older and much more urgent. The question this episode is asking, the question that took this series 24 episodes to prepare you for, is this: what would it mean to hold the switch? Not to lose the perception, not to become someone who misses things, who is naive, who does not see what is actually there. To be the one who decides what to illuminate.
Here's the question I want to build toward. The one that, by the end of this episode, I want you to be able to answer with genuine discernment, rather than from the habitual assumption that seeing everything is always better. Are you actually intuitive, or are you primarily hyper-vigilant? These are not the same thing. They produce similar outputs. Both involve the perception of things others miss. Both involve a quality of awareness that most people around you do not share. But they come from different places and serve different functions, and produce over time radically different qualities of life. Hypervigilance is scanning for threat. It is the continuous, background, exhausting process of monitoring every person and every environment for the signal that something is wrong. It is perception in the service of survival. Intuition is scanning for signal. It is the directed, chosen, purposeful deployment of your perceptive capacity toward what actually matters, toward the path forward, toward the people worth understanding, toward the questions worth holding. The difference is not in what you see. It is in why you are looking. And by the end of this episode, I want to give you the specific, practical framework for shifting the looking from hypervigilance to intuition, from the floodlight that exhausts by illuminating everything to the flashlight that empowers by illuminating what you choose. Let me name the specific paradox at the center of the hyperperceptive experience, because naming it precisely is the first step toward dissolving it. You believe, and this belief is understandable because it was formed by direct experience, that your safety depends on noticing everything. If you miss a micro-expression, you might miss a warning. If you stop tracking the subtext, something important might happen that you were not prepared for. If you allow yourself to simply take people at face value, to receive the surface without scanning for what lies beneath, you will be caught off guard. And being caught off guard is, in the original context where this belief was formed, genuinely dangerous. This is the belief that produces the floodlight. I must see everything because anything I miss might hurt me. But here is the paradox, the specific, structural, important paradox that this belief generates in practice. The more you try to see everything, the less you can actually use what you see. Because perception requires processing, and processing requires resources, and resources are finite. When every incoming signal is treated as equally urgent, when the micro-expression of the acquaintance at the party receives the same processing priority as the emotional availability of your closest friend, the system becomes overwhelmed, not by the volume of data, but by the inability to prioritize it. You have been running your perception as a floodlight, illuminating everything simultaneously, equally, with the same urgency,
when what you actually need is a flashlight, not less perception, directed perception. The difference between the two is not about seeing less, it is about choosing what deserves the resources, about establishing, consciously and deliberately, what is actually relevant to your well-being and your navigation, and releasing, without guilt and without the anxiety of missing something important, what is simply ambient noise that your system has been treating as signal. The reticular activating system, the specific neural network that functions as your attention's gatekeeper, operates by filtering incoming data based on what it has been trained to prioritize. In the hyper-vigilance state, it has been trained to prioritize everything that could be a threat. Everything gets through. Everything demands processing. Directed intuition is the practice of retraining the gatekeeper, of deciding, consciously and repeatedly, what actually deserves your perception and what can be allowed to pass without absorption. Not because the unprocessed things do not exist, because they are not yours to carry.
Let me trace the specific cognitive mechanism that makes the floodlight so exhausting, because it is not just the volume of incoming data, it is what you do with it before it has been verified. In psychology, this is called cognitive over-integration, the tendency to weave intuitive perceptions directly into your working model of reality, without first establishing whether they are observations or conclusions. Here is the distinction that changes everything. An observation is, they seem tense right now. A conclusion is, they are angry at me and this relationship may be ending. The observation requires no action. It is simply data, accurate, useful, worth noting. It can inform your sensitivity without directing your behavior. The conclusion has jumped from the data point to a fully formed narrative, skipping the many steps of verification that would be required to actually establish whether the narrative is accurate. It has made you judge and jury before anyone has spoken. And here is the specific, costly thing that cognitive over-integration does to a relationship before it has had the chance to unfold. It causes you to respond to your conclusion rather than to the person. You are no longer in the conversation with the actual person. You are in the conversation with your model of the person, which was constructed from a data point that has not yet been tested. Your behavior is being directed by a narrative that exists entirely in your processing, and the person, unaware that the narrative exists, is experiencing your changed behavior without any context for understanding it. They sense something has shifted. They become more tense. Your original observation is confirmed, and the loop closes, the conclusion appearing to be validated, the narrative appearing to be accurate, the hypervigilance appearing to have been justified, when what actually happened was, you created the very reality you were trying to predict. The perception became the cause, not the detector.
I want to name a specific and rarely discussed dimension of the hyperperceptive experience, one that carries its own particular darkness and that almost never gets adequate space in conversations about sensitivity and intuition. The guilt of seeing what people want to hide. When you perceive someone's insecurity, the specific particular quality of it, the shape it takes in their behavior, the way it drives the choices they are making in this conversation, you are holding something about them that they have not offered you. You are in possession of a truth about their interior that they are working, consciously or not, to keep private. This creates a specific, uncomfortable power asymmetry. You know something about them that they do not know you know, and you are expected to participate in the social interaction as though you do not know it, to receive their surface while privately holding their depth, to engage with the version they are presenting while being privately aware of the version beneath the presentation. This is the voyeur's experience, and it produces a specific guilt. Not the guilt of having done anything wrong, but the guilt of seeing something that was not meant to be seen. Over time, over years of this specific experience, of perceiving below the surface of every person in every room, this guilt accumulates into what I call perceptual fatigue, the specific depletion of a person who has been running a continuous, involuntary, high-resolution scan of the emotional interior of everyone around them, holding what they see, managing what they know, and trying to participate normally in the conversation that is happening on the surface. You are playing 4D chess while everyone else is trying to have lunch. And the exhaustion is not just the energy cost of the processing, it is the specific cost of the isolation it produces, because the depth of your perception separates you from the people around you in a way that cannot be easily bridged. You cannot share what you see without violating the implicit privacy of the people you are seeing into. You cannot not see it.
The perception is not optional, and you cannot participate in the surface conversation with the same quality of presence as someone who is not simultaneously tracking everything beneath it. The result? Withdrawal. Not because you do not want connection, but because the specific cost of the connection you have been trying to have, the cost of being present in a room while running continuous background processing of every person in it, eventually exceeds what is sustainable. And so you choose isolation over the noise of other people's souls, until you learn to choose something else.
Here is the reframe I have been building toward, and I want to deliver it as a genuinely positive vision, rather than just a restriction. Your insight is not a problem to be managed. It is an extraordinary capacity to be deployed. The difference between the experience of being held hostage by your perception and the experience of your perception as a directed tool is not about how much you see. It is about whether you are choosing what to illuminate or whether you are simply receiving whatever arrives. Directed intuition is the practice of holding the switch. Here is what it is not. It is not becoming less perceptive. It is not forcing yourself to be naive or to miss things, or to receive the world at a lower resolution than it actually transmits. It is not the suppression of your sensitivity. Here is what it is: the conscious, deliberate, ongoing practice of asking, before your perception fully activates, does this deserve my processing resources right now? Not everything that can be perceived needs to be carried. Not every truth your system detects belongs to you. Not every emotional undercurrent in every room requires your intervention or your analysis or your full absorption. There are perceptions that are genuinely actionable, that require a response, that inform a meaningful choice, that serve your navigation toward the life you are building. These deserve your full processing power. And there are perceptions that are simply ambient data, true, accurate, requiring no action, none of your business, not relevant to any decision you are currently facing or any relationship you are currently investing in. These deserve to be noted and released. The specific, important distinction at the center of this episode, the one that I promised at the beginning, is this. Vigilance is looking for a threat so you can survive it. Intuition is looking for a path so you can walk it. These produce similar perception. They produce radically different relationships to that perception. The vigilant person cannot set the data down, because every piece of data might be the threat that the vigilance was built to catch. The intuitive person can set most data down, because they are not scanning for survival, they are navigating toward something. The shift from vigilance to intuition is the shift from passive receptor to active navigator, from being held hostage by everything you notice to choosing what deserves your light. The practices in this episode need to work at the level of the perception itself, interrupting the automatic absorption before it becomes full integration. The first practice is the so what filter. The moment you receive an intuitive hit, the micro-expression, the tonal shift, the sense of something beneath the surface, before you integrate it into your working model of the situation, ask one question. So what? Not dismissively, genuinely. What does this information require of me right now? Does it call for action? Does it change a decision I am currently facing? Does it inform something I need to respond to? If the answer is nothing, if the information, while accurate, requires no action from you and serves no immediate navigational purpose, it is ambient data. You can note it and allow it to pass without full absorption. You are not ignoring it. You are choosing not to carry it. This is not a failure of your perceptiveness. It is the exercise of your agency over it. The second practice is the observation anchor. When you notice yourself moving rapidly from observation to conclusion, when the tense person in the corner is already threatening the relationship in your processing before anyone has said a word, interrupt the cascade with the specific, deliberate return to the raw observation. They seem tense. That is all I actually know right now. Not, they are angry at me and this means X. Just, they seem tense. Hold the observation without adding to it. Allow it to be incomplete. Allow reality to provide the additional information that your processing was about to manufacture. Practice the specific, uncomfortable tolerance of not yet knowing, of holding an accurate observation without converting it into a conclusion that directs your behavior before the actual conversation has had a chance to unfold. The third practice is the intentionally shallow internal. Once a day,
in one interaction for one defined period. Practice receiving only the surface, only the words, not the subtext, not the micro-expression, not the emotional undercurrent, just what is actually being said. This will feel, initially, like a deliberate dulling of your perception, like choosing to see less than you are capable of seeing. It is not less perception. It is rest for the part of your perception that has been running without pause. And in that rest, in the specific, briefly available quiet of a perception that is not being demanded, something that has been unavailable emerges. The room. Just the room. And you, in it. Actually there.
We began this episode with a room that was not just a room, a symphony of unspoken tensions, a field of emotional data that your system received automatically and carried completely. I want to return you to that room, but differently. You are walking in. The data is there. It is always there. Your system is calibrated to receive it. That will not change and was never meant to change. The couple in the corner has their tension. The friend has their unexpressed something. The host's smile says what it says. You notice. And then, and this is the new thing, the practiced thing, the thing that this episode has been building toward, you ask, what does this require of me right now? And in most cases, in the ordinary dinner party, in the gathering of people who are simply being people, the answer is nothing. The tension in the corner is not yours to manage. The unexpressed something belongs to your friend and will become yours when they choose to make it so. The host's smile is information about the host, not a task assigned to you. You note it, and you set it down. And in the space that opens when you set it down, when the processing capacity that was perpetually occupied by ambient data returns to you, something becomes available that the floodlight had been preventing. You are just in the room, not observing it, not tracking it, not managing it, not running your intelligence operation through it, just in it, present, specific, choosing what deserves your light. The room is just a room. You have the switch. Use it.